Welcome to our channel, where we set out to explore wonderful great works of literature.
While dressed in elegant clothing, because
Why the hell not? So today is very exciting for me because this is actually one of my favorite authors. Actually, I'm not sure how you feel about this, but he's actually considered quite on par with Somerset Maugham, who is, also our favorite author that we share. So they wrote around the same time, and of course Somerset Maugham sort of was very popular in England, and Stefan Zweig, who is the author we'll be talking about today, was very popular in Austria. He was part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire before it collapsed, and before some dreadful things happened, of course, as we all know in history. The Nazi Party took over in Germany and invaded Austria, and essentially because he was a Jew, he fled. He fled the persecution, and he went to England. I think he may have gone to France. He traveled a few places in Europe, and then he finally settled in Brazil, in a town called Petropolis, I believe. And he was with his wife named Lotte, and together, right before the end of the war, I believe, they ended up committing suicide together.
Oh gosh!
Taking barbiturates, and just
tragic.
Yeah, it was quite tragic.
Mm-hmm.
He was actually part of this group of this sort of Viennese circle of literary figures. And German figures. Like, he was very much in collaboration, and not collaboration, but he was in some correspondence with Thomas Mann. He's kind of like boxed in with this group of intellectuals and these writers. Thomas Mann, Philip Roth. Philip Roth is another Austrian who I haven't really read before, but kind of want to remedy that soon. And in the same way as Somerset Maugham, he was always considered a little bit of a second-rate writer. But I think that's unfair. Would you say that's an unfair assessment of?
I mean, we're not
Stefan
from
Zweig?
that time, so it's hard to say why that was second rate at that time.
Yeah.
Right? But
it's true.
Mm-hmm.
It's true in a sense. But there's a certain beauty to his writing, and it has a beautiful style. And I think a lot of times
usually a beautiful moral.
Yeah.
To the stories.
And there's a moral element to it, and they're also deeply psychological, which is very interesting because he himself was a fan of Freud, and he actually underwent psychoanalysis, and he felt it actually helped him with his inhibitions. So it helped release some of those sort of certain feelings that he felt like were keeping him back. And so a lot of his novels have a deep psychological sort of tinge to them, and an analysis of human behavior and an internal aspect to the characters as well. Like, you kind of get into their thought processes. And it always seems relevant. It doesn't really matter at what time he's writing. It always feels like it's something that can be taken up by any generation of readers.
Okay.
Yeah, so we have two. And first off, I need to, I guess, apologize because we have two Pushkin Press publications. And they've done like an excellent job in terms of reintroducing Stefan Zweig's writings to the English reading public, because in England apparently he wasn't very well known as a writer at the time, right? But one of the books I lost. So one of the ones that we want to cover today, it was called Beware of Pity. And
I wonder if you donated it or something.
Maybe
it's disappeared.
It's no longer in any of my
Someone
shelves.
borrowed it, or we donated it.
Or grew legs and disappeared and walked off. But the thing is, that was actually his only novella his only novel that he actually ended up writing. So it's.
So we'll start with that one?
Yeah,
Okay.
Shall we? Yeah. So obviously, we won't
Beware
have
of Pity, and then what was the other one we're doing?
The other one is so in the red volume there is a collected novellas of Stefan Zweig, and that one is the Burning Secret. So I've seen other YouTube channels actually cover some of his other novellas. Like one gentleman covered sort of I think it was like the chess game or something, and that's an interesting one. It's on a cruise ship, and it has all this intrigue and all interesting sort of like set piece. But this one I really enjoyed because it was so comical.
Which one?
It's called The Burning Secret.
Yeah, but we'll talk about that.
Yeah, we'll talk about that later. I'm getting ahead of myself.
Yes.
Okay.
Calm down. He gets so excited in the beginning, then he's like, like gonna talk a million miles a minute because I'm so excited about it.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
So
beware of pity.
Beware of pity.
Go for it. You do an introduction to it.
Okay, so it was written in 1939, and essentially it's set around 1914, so it's pre World War One, and it starts off with the main character as a cavalry officer, and I believe his name is Anton Hofsmiller or something along those lines. Hofsmiller, something along those lines. Anyway, his name is Anton, and his regiment goes from one small town to the other, and they kind of like encamp and they stay at the barracks.
He's like in his mid-20s.
Yeah, he's 25. Yeah, and he hears about this famous and incredibly wealthy merchant or gentleman who lives in the city, kind of like owns everything in the city. He's like very wealthy, named Kakasvalfa. And it was always amusing because you were always trying to pronounce Kakasvalfa, and I think I'm not doing any better pronunciation on it. So that's
I just said Kakasvalfa.
Yeah,
I don't know if it
or every
sounds
sort of
awful.
permutation of that.
Anyway, yeah.
So essentially he's invited to a ball.
Party.
His ball, yes. This very grand gentleman invites everyone and some officers
and honestly,
to the ball.
I feel like I've seen this scene in movies. Like it's a very famous scene.
What scene?
Oh, when he's at the ball and he asks the young Edith to dance. I've seen this somewhere before, not just like in other movies. Anyway, so he's like, oh, I better do this man an honor, and he wants to impress Kekasvalfa. By the way, he wants to impress him, so he goes to the daughter thinking, oh, this is a great way to impress. I'll ask the daughter to dance just out of respect, and then he notices she has a blanket on her legs, and she's like, oh, it must be cold or something.
And she has a nurse beside her.
And, he doesn't. I don't think he notices that.
Does he not? Oh,
no.
Okay.
He's just like very in his mindset to ask her to dance, and then he doesn't really know what he did wrong because everyone's like and gasp, and then she like tries to get up and falls back down, and there's a huge crash, and then everyone kind of is just like, oh, and he's like, I don't know what I've done, kind of thing, and then I think they push her out of the room, and he realizes that she is crippled.
Yeah, so she doesn't have the use of her legs.
Yeah.
And so
sorry, bad terminology for today's time, but that's how
it's referred in the book, right?
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
So he's horrified at his blunder.
Yeah.
And so he kind of like leaves in shame, and he's completely distraught by what he's done. And he comes back to apologize, I believe, right? The following day, or
the following day he knocks on the door and he's like, oh, I would like to meet with Edith and just have a conversation with her. And so he tries to make up for it, but then it's just kind of spirals from there. Like he just feels so much guilt and pity and compassion and all these mixed feelings towards this young girl. And he's expressed that he never really felt that he had a purpose before that moment, so he almost uses her, which in a way he thinks he's doing good.
Well, hold on, let's explain essentially what he's doing that makes him feel good.
Well, not yet.
No?
Okay, fine.
Well, essentially,
so
it really, like, her father talks to him, and he starts to visit every day, first out of a sense of like obligation because he wants slighted her in a way.
Yeah, he wants to make up for his faux pas.
And of course, as the more and more he comes, the more Edith and him, they kind of have this bond, and Edith grows a strong attachment to him and actually falls in love with him. And, it becomes rather, certain times, she's kind of destitute without him. She's lost without him when he doesn't come to visit.
Those affections, so
but the thing is, he's like,
he feels a different sense of love for her.
Yeah, he gets a sense exactly of the pity, right?
Yeah.
Like, he gets a high in a way from her wanting him, and the fact that he can actually almost be like God in the sense of like imbue this person with a sense of life and vitality and happiness. And he flip-flops through these kind of like moods where he feels utterly useless and depraved and a base human, and then this godliness where he can feel like he can imbue her with this wonderful. Anyway, so essentially what happens is the father says, hey, listen, I'm very wealthy. If you're interested in the wealth, the prestige,
well, because he's making it almost as if he is courting her, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I think the father really felt that he had affections for her.
Well, he's so
because
essentially
he's acting like he was.
so-
It was confusing.
so essentially the finish is just like he suggests like if you marry my daughter,
Yeah.
you can have all of the things that. And so this father is absolutely smitten with his daughter.
Yeah. He adores her.
Like he's completely like head over heels because.
And she kind of rules the roost. Like she's like, she in a way she's a little bit manipulative because she's like, oh, I'll just harm myself if you don't do this for me, I'll harm myself. Like so she's an interesting character because it's like you do pity her on one level and you do have compassion for her on the other hand. But we were having a bit of a discussion about this, about how you treat someone like a victim, they'll act like a victim.
Right.
You treat somebody with the sense that they have what was the word I used? Agency. Yeah, the sense of agency, then they'll act like they're empowered.
Yeah.
And I think the problem in this whole novel was that no one ever treated her as if she was a human being, really.
Yeah,
they treated her like a doll, or they treat her like a frail child.
Yeah, like
an
invalid,
and she was a young woman.
Yeah.
And that's all she wanted to be treated like a young woman, like anyone else.
Yeah.
And so it was this and the soldier, what was his name? Anton felt guilty for not seeing her that way. So it was it was very psychological.
Yeah. And the father like showered all these praises, obviously because he felt tremendous guilt and he felt terrible pity as well for his daughter. But the daughter reminded him of his wife, who also died, I think, rather prematurely.
I think in childbirth, maybe.
Yeah,
so there's also
something tragic.
So then, like, Edith also feels, I think, a sense of guilt for that.
Yeah,
too,
so
right?
there's a deeper connection there between father and daughter.
She feels like she's a burden because she was not the cause. I mean, childbirth was pretty common to die back then, but I think she felt responsible for many things, and yet. She felt responsible, but she'd still take advantage of people because of her own mood, right?
Yeah. But what's interesting is like Stefan Zweig also produces a parallel story to the main one that kind of shows how this type of pity or sympathy or compassion actually becomes a success and it results in a positive outcome. Yeah. And so that's kind of sort of personified through the doctor, where the doctor... he has this a patient who is incurable. I think it was a blindness or something, right?
And he falls deeply in love with her.
He falls deeply in love with her, and it's a true compassion. It's
and
true
bond
love
between both of them.
Yeah, and so it becomes like a very successful marriage. And then so sort of juxtaposed to this is this also very tumultuous thing between the cavalry officer and Edith, and it ends tragically. I mean, as many things do in literature, but
well, it's like that the pathway to hell is paved with good intention is really what I felt. It's like he really thought that he was doing something good for this young girl by giving her company and feeding her these delusions of like, oh, you'll get better, and false hope that he can have a relationship with her, and then anyway, I won't ruin it, but it just ends. It just shows you the consequence of like, don't mess with human emotion. And I actually see it differently. Like he wavers with some moments of true compassion, but I think the main feeling he had was pity. And there's a huge difference between the two, because you can have compassion and detach, but when you have pity, it's that sense that you're treating someone like a victim, like they need to be pitied, like they need to be given something. They're
below a particular
like they're not
standard or something.
Yeah, exactly. They're not quite at the same level, or they've had too many disadvantages in life to be treated as a same level.
That's what I love about that. Like this distinction between like what is good and what is bad. Like even something that could be objectively considered a virtue, some sort of virtue, to have compassion or pity, can immediately distort the picture and be its complete opposite.
Yeah.
And he does it it's very nuanced. So as you're reading it, you kind of get a sense of his thoughts and feelings and what exactly is happening behind the outward events, the internal minds of these characters. It's really well done.
You know what it kind of reminded me of? The main character, Edith, reminded me of The Secret Garden.
Okay.
Do you remember that? The main character in The Secret Garden, and how she's like always kept in this like room and always treated
Like
so
sheltered.
sickly and sheltered, and everyone tiptoes around her. It was a very similar character.
Yeah. It was an excellent book. Highly recommended.
Yeah.
Should we push on to the next one?
Sure.
Okay. So the next one is a novella. So.
And this one's fitting for Mother's Day, since today's Mother's Day.
Is it fitting for
Well,
Mother's Day?
maybe not fitting,
It's
but it's
weird
about a
for,
mother.
It's about a mother.
Maybe a bit weird. Okay, maybe it's not fitting for Mother's
it's not
Day.
fitting for a mother.
Well,
For
in a
Mother's Day.
way, it shows the strength of a mother's love for their child. In the very end.
Yeah, in the very end.
The very end.
I
Okay,
suppose.
maybe it's not the best one for
That's
Mother's
that's
Day,
stretching,
but
that's stretching.
it's stretching.
Anyway, so the next one is again set in Austria, and there's a baron. I think he's just like he's a civil servant. I think he has a very lowly bureaucratic office, or maybe something not terribly exciting in the giant administrative bureaucratic infrastructure of the Austrian sort of Austro-Hungarian Empire, right? And so essentially he goes on holidays to like a spa resort somewhere in the mountains, right?
He's like
He's a bit of a,
he's a
he's a
little
bit of a
player.
cat. He's a bit of a cat.
Player.
Yeah, he's a bit of a cat. So
Little womanizer.
yeah, so he kind of like he's looking for a nice fling, and he's like, you know,
Not just that, he's like he did a perfect description of him.
Yeah.
It's like someone who cannot, like, unless he has a prospect of showing something off, some sort of skill off, he's bored. Like, he's one of those people who like can't be alone with themselves.
Yeah.
They're, like that's how he described it. He's like kind of, so I imagine this like man who just, he's supposed to take holidays, but he has no idea how to relax.
No idea how to
like,
relax,
No
yeah.
idea.
he's an adventurer.
Yeah.
He needs that.
Yeah, adventurer and someone who's like very like extroverted, right?
Yeah,
You know, has to have something to entertain him or be entertained, or competitive too by nature.
So essentially, he's sitting in like the dining hall. It's the season. It's
he's,
like
moping,
but it's
like,
off season. It's off season, so there isn't very many people there. And fair enough, he sees across the room this like beautiful
Not yet. Not at the
woman.
beginning. Eventually, he's like, oh, I may as well leave and let end my holiday. He's like about to up and leave. He's like looking at the registry in the hotel to see if there's any women's names there. He doesn't see one. Any single ladies, so he's like very upset. It's so funny because it's like today's world. You could totally see this character showing up to like some fancy resort, right? Looking for some...
So eventually he
Anyways.
espies this beautiful woman with her young son who's about 12 or 11 or something like that, or 14. He was like a young boy on the sort of the peak of, you know, adolescence. And so anyway, he realizes that, you know, he has a chance. There's this way in which, you know, this woman is not, because she's not almost paying attention to him, he realizes that she's purposely not paying attention to him, and in which sense she's kind of paying attention to him, and she realizes his presence. And so anyway, he realizes that the way to the woman's heart is through the young boy.
Such a jerk.
And so he ends up,
jerk.
yeah, absolutely. So he ends up befriending the boy.
Who's clearly this like something's wrong with him, like he's there to recover from something, and he's like a little bit of a lonely, aloof child who's like trying to get attention seeking, like going to all these adults trying to get their attention, but doesn't really
Everyone
know how.
dismisses him and treats him like a little child.
And they describe him as this like awkward age of like 13 or something or
like
12 or something.
12 or 14. I don't
Anyway, where you're like that ugly duckling stage where you're like not really a boy but not really an adult, and you know, you're uncomfortable in your own skin and trying to figure out, you know, you don't want to be treated like a child, but you don't also want to be treated like an adult quite yet. You wouldn't know how to do that. That's how they describe the son.
And so like this young dashing sort of officer type person, this adult actually starts talking to the young boy and gives him attention and treats him like an actual adult.
Has all these adventure stories that the boy's like intrigued by. Yeah.
So he finally gets the boy finally gets this sense of like, finally I'm being given the sort of the due respect that I deserve as a real fully fledged adult. Yeah. And so what the boy soon discovers is that the whole idea is that this guy's not really interested in
he
me.
basically the boy figures it all out, right? And
in a way,
like in an innocent way, he's like, oh, this man doesn't want anything. He just wants my mom's attention. He doesn't really know that it's like a sexual attraction.
He doesn't know
really.
why.
But he knows he's like really upset that both of them in the end are trying to like meet up coyly, and he's pissed off. Like, rightfully pissed off because he was used by both his mom and his like this person.
And so he through his through his wild imagination. Like, first off, what happens is when he realizes that it's not for him and he's been slighted in a way by this man.
In a very cute, innocent way. Like, it's really hilarious.
But by being almost like in his cute, innocent way, he ends up being like this like thorn in their side by just being present and never leaving them alone to consummate whatever they're trying to consummate.
But what's hilarious about it is like morally, he's like actually in the high road. Like that's what's so it's hilarious because both parties are like getting so super angry with him, and he's just innocently acting like he doesn't know how morally wrong.
Because they know they're doing something wrong, right?
Yeah, and so he figures out they're doing something wrong, but he doesn't know exactly what it is, right? And so anyway, it's just this really clever,
he learns how to manipulate the situation a little bit to torture them.
Way.
And it's actually ends up being like hilarious, that the entire sequence. And so what he realizes is that there is a deep secret that he doesn't yet know about that he's trying to figure out, and he comes up with all these different things that maybe this guy's trying to murder his mother. He's like a criminal.
Yeah,
from
he
all
knows
the books that he's read.
He knows he's no good, and he even says it in a way to his mother, like, once whatever he wants from you, he's gotten. He's gonna get rid of you, Mom, and she knows that. Like, she knows that on some level that her son's right, but she doesn't want to hear it, so she lashes out at him. Yeah. Anyway, so it's great.
It was a great one.
I actually I like this one more than Beware of Pity, because I think Beware of Pity, all the characters kind of annoyed me for their own ways. There's too many. There's no hero of that story, really.
Yeah. Do you find there was a hero in this other
the little boy was totally the hero. I forget his name. Oh yeah.
Yeah. What was his name? I don't recall his name. Anyway.
And then he becomes like this, like, he really enters into the adult world because he discovers his own individuality in a way, right? His own independence is the best way to put it.
Yeah.
Through it.
Just another thing I wanted to mention before we rate these. So Stefan Zweig, I first.
I'll get more tea while you keep talking.
Well, I heard from no, you stay.
Okay.
I heard he was I heard first from a friend, but also the director Wes Anderson. Mm-hmm. You know the Wes Anderson films?
Yeah.
So
we always have dogs or animals with fur that blows.
Well, there was that one, but there's one, the Budapest Hotel. Yeah. And I love that movie. I love the aesthetic of Wes Anderson films and the quirkiness about it. So essentially, that was actually loosely based on Beware of Pity.
Oh,
the
really?
Budapest Hotel. I don't see how it was.
What?
I don't really understand.
Oh, maybe just because the one young boy in it. That's the only thing I can see.
But the whole aesthetic and so the Austro-Hungarian grandeur and elegance and all that stuff, that's very much influenced by his reading of Stefan Zweig.
Oh, okay.
So every time I see or think of Wes Anderson, I always think of Stefan Zweig and vice versa. And so the writing is so beautiful. It's so elegant. Like, it's elegant in its simplicity. Like Thomas Mann, you read Thomas Mann, and it's really heavy-going stuff. Like, it's very dense, full of philosophy, full of intellectualism, full of even very grandiose ideas. But these are very large, real-world ideas. But they're in such an easily digestible package that they have infinite nuance in them without being overwhelming.
Yeah.
And that's what
you get immersed in the story and not lost in the words.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Okay, back.
Okay, so starting again. Okay, so shall we rate this? So let's start with the first one. Beware of Pity. How would you rate that?
I'm gonna give it a 3.
That's it? A 3 out of 5?
Yeah. I'm telling you, I don't like when characters are victims. And I don't like when people manipulate for their own ego, which was essentially what The Officer was all about. He didn't realize it at the time, but it that really irks me to play with someone's vulnerability and then use it to elevate your own ego, really.
Yeah.
P.O.'s me.
So I don't think he was being.
I don't think he was.
Consciously manipulated.
Neither do I, but that makes still doesn't like.
But I honestly think it's different, a little bit different for me if it was consciously
it would
manipulated
make
versus
it more
unconsciously
evil, but
manipulated.
like then he'd be a good villain.
Yeah.
So I mean, it made him more human for sure. But it's like, yeah, I think it's just something that I get really frustrated with because you see it a lot today, right? Like you see in social media people advertising as if they're all doing these like great deeds, and it's like, you know, they have their face all over everything, and it's not really about the deed they're doing. It's all for the attention. And this was just a I guess a past way of doing that, like almost like a community narcissist. And that really.
I honestly think it's more.
Maybe there's a little more innocence to it, but in the end, it was like, how did you not see this coming, buddy?
I don't know. I just feel like I have a little bit more. I have a more understanding that this could happen even to the most well-intentioned person. So
I don't know, but there's so many moments where he didn't listen to his conscience.
But like, I feel like
he was like,
but even well-intentioned, I feel like there could be happen with anybody.
No, he pushed the line too far. He knew that there was like a moment where he had to cut it off, and he like kept pushing it.
Yeah.
It was very human. Like he didn't do anything evil, but it just like that's just my pet peeve.
Mm-hmm. So anyway,
that's why I gave it a 3.
I would give it a good 4.5 out of.
Oh wow, you liked it a lot.
Yeah. And okay, for the
you really had pity for that character.
Well, it's not that I had pity for him. I was like, I could understand.
That's the irony. Is like in the end, you have more pity. Well, maybe not more pity, but you have pity for all the characters.
No,
every single one.
Yeah, it's just like I feel like they're just human. It's just like anyone can make those human errors, and like it's I'm not It's almost like a Greek. It's almost like in a sense like a Greek tragedy where they don't. No one ever really deserves any of the misfortune that really kind of happens to them. It's just like they are propelled forward by these things, by bad decisions that eventually end up having catastrophic consequences in the end, and they're kind of like led along by this. I guess
so, but I'm like, I don't know. Yeah. I guess I'm too judgmental of it. Anyway. Yeah. So I don't like when I end a story though, and I'm like, I'm annoyed. That's the best way to describe it.
So what about the novella?
Oh, I like this one a lot.
The Burning Secret.
4.7.
Yeah, I would give it a 4.7 just because it was hilarious.
Yeah, it was hilarious.
And it was so insightful funny, psychologically.
Great everyone's happy in the end. Happy.
Joy.
Happy, joy, no tragedy. Yeah, what I found fascinating about the author is that he could write those 2 books. There's such different endings and such different message and the characters.
But they're so psychological, so that's so
similar and psychological. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. No, it was wonderful writer. Totally recommend any of his works. This one here, this collection here, in the orange is actually I haven't read this yet, but it's a collection of his short stories. I know you're not a huge fan of short stories, but
I like this one. So.
But yeah, this one novella, it kind of like gives you enough time to kind of get into the characters and a little bit more nuanced. This one, it would probably be a little bit of a quicker read, but totally worth it if you want to explore, a very underrated. Well, he was very highly rated in the 20th century, but he's now.
Yeah, you don't hear him too often when people talk about classics. But he was awesome. He was amazing.
I think he's getting a resurgence. Hopefully.
Is he?
I hope so.
Hopefully we can push that resurgence.
That's right. Okay. Well, anything else we want to conclude with?
Happy Mother's Day to all
Happy
those
Mother's
mamas.
Day. Yes, to all those ladies out there. And,
who are mamas.
Who are also mamas. Well, anyway, thank you for joining us this evening, and we hope you return, and we'll speak to you next time.
Thanks for joining us.
Take care.